Things should go back to how they used to be. It was better when it was harder. I had it harder when I was there. You're too coddled to know what's good or bad. We'll never get back to that golden era. Do any of these sentiments sound familiar? Today we're going to address them all through the context of a community that has been at war with itself for 2 decades. Today we're digging deep into the brutal fandom of Ninja Gaiden. In Ninja Gaiden, the pinnacle achievement tends to come in two flavors. First, there's finishing the main game on the hardest difficulty. This is typically called Master Ninja difficulty. The second is finishing all of the side content at its highest level of difficulty. The side content in Ninja Gaiden varies, but typically this means a series of trials or missions that are short encounters. They escalate in difficulty and usually surpass the initial difficulty of merely clearing the game on Master Ninja difficulty. And if I say difficulty one more time, I might go crazy, but that's right. If Ninja Gaiden's legendary Master Ninja mode wasn't ball busting enough, they decided to create insane and frankly unfair at times scenarios to test even the most skilled masochist. When we think about answering the community's questions on how Ninja Gaiden should be or should not be, we really need to think about where these questions or opinions come from. While the Ninja Gaiden community has a long history of being at war with itself, one sentiment seems to stand the test of time and rear its head time and time again. That sentiment? That Ninja Gaiden used to be harder, that Ninja Gaiden used to be better. So, where do these statements come from? Well, for that, we have to give a little bit of TLDR. Ninja Gaiden and Team Ninja used to be led by a guy named Itagaki, and he was kind of unhinged. He was very puff his chest up, very brazen, and he challenged everyone, constantly putting his Dead or Alive games to pit against Tekken. They were the underdog, trying to just outdo the Tekken team, whatever it took, and that was kind of his legacy. I make the best games. No one's better than me and my team, and we make the coolest games. We don't play by the rules, and we don't really need professionalism. We just need really cool attitudes and sunglasses. That was kind of the vibe, like rock star game dev type stuff. And in those days, we basically got games that said F you to players, games that were just hard and unapologetic about it. So, with this head to head, even forced competition pushing Team Ninja as a studio to higher and higher heights, we saw a golden era of games like Ninja Gaiden and Dead or Alive that were front and center for Xbox fans everywhere. There wasn't an Xbox fan alive who wasn't aware of Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball, a game that pops its head in time and time to remind us of what memes were like in the early 2000s. But really, the meat and potatoes of these opinions, it comes down to how Ninja Gaiden released as a product back in those days, whether by attribution to the developers or being a product of its time or just the global dominance of Xbox at that time. What it really comes down to was that Ninja Gaiden was legendary for its difficulty, and it was incredibly popular. Ninja Gaiden 2 has multiple versions, and don't worry, this is relevant, but Ninja Gaiden 2, the first game's sequel, it established itself as the premier and often claimed best action game in the world. It's no wonder that eventually it was re-released with multiple versions. Not quite so many versions as Skyrim, but close, pretty close. The original Xbox 360 version we'll refer to as OG, Original Gangster, the rough and tumble version that didn't play by any rules. Then a year later, after Itagaki as a developer left Team Ninja, we got the PlayStation release with Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2. Boy, that's a mouthful. And recently, Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. With all these versions, it can be difficult to keep track of what we're discussing. So from here on out, we'll call Ninja Gaiden 2 the OG, we'll call Sigma 2, and we'll call Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, well, Black. With all these versions and changes, the sentiment remains today that the most difficult Ninja Gaiden game is the OG version on Xbox 360. It's unfair, it's ruthless, and the only thing that really comes close is Ninja Gaiden 3 on its Ultimate Ninja difficulty. At least that final boss, anyways, totally ruthless. And if the OG version of 2 is the hardest, then what's the hardest challenge available on that version? Well, for a long time, it was just beating Master Ninja. That was it until DLC eventually came. So let's evaluate that. 1.21% have the achievement for clearing Master Ninja on Ninja Gaiden 2's original Xbox 360 version. What many don't know or maybe don't remember about that rare, coveted 1.21% is that it's an inflated number. An unknown number of players actually cleared Master Ninja on this version through the use of an invincibility glitch. I've got a clip here, but basically you open the quick menu, press a couple buttons at the right time, and you become invulnerable. And as of 4 years ago, this glitch was still in the game. I haven't tested it myself yet, but maybe I will. Maybe I will in time for this video, maybe I won't. In any case, though, it's a very, very old glitch and allows you to just not take damage. It does have some limitations, but you can manipulate it to get through the game pretty easily. The OG game, on top of this, right, having this coveted achievement that not many people got, but some people kind of cheesed through, it sold 1.1 million copies. So we can probably infer that around a million people played Ninja Gaiden 2 OG back in 2008. That's a pretty damn good launch for a 2008 game, and people even today are still saying we need to go back to that grueling difficulty. But wait, what made it so difficult to begin with? OG NG2 was infamous for a few reasons. Encounters had many, many more enemies than a modern version of Ninja Gaiden, and those enemies were more aggressive with more types of attacks available to them. So if we look at werewolves, for example, in Sigma 2 or in Black, you might have X number of werewolves, and then you would have 1.5 or 2 times as many werewolves in the OG version. And the attacks that the werewolves could do in the Sigma or Black versions, they might pounce, they might grab, they might strong punch, swipe combo, and charge. In the original, they would be able to do all of those same attacks, but then also they're throwing body parts at you from off screen that do 25%, 50% of your HP bar if you don't dodge a projectile that you can't see, and their pounce range was also increased as they were more aggressive. These types of differences mean that if a mob did slightly less damage in the original individually, but you had 8, 10, or even 15 of them all chaining their attacks together, overlapping them constantly, it put the player in a constant state of pressure and danger. You had to act preemptively to ensure the enemies died faster than you were dying. That was the name of the game. Ryu Hayabusa was going to die. But could you make sure that his enemies died first? On top of this, OG2 had bosses that were littered with additional enemies, and the types of those enemies were different. Later versions significantly trimmed down and removed what we call IS ninjas, or incendiary shuriken ninjas. They were a nasty type of ninja as a baseline. They were the claw ninjas, spider ninjas. They're known for instant kill grabs, multi-hit combos, varied pace of the tempo on their combos to throw off the player or catch them when they're trying to move or dash, and are ultimately something that could tear you apart if you don't act preemptively, aggressively, and ultimately correctly. But on top of being that style of ninja, they would also spam throw incendiary shurikens, which can go through your ultimate techniques, it can go through your blocks, and other moves that would otherwise give you an iframe or an invincibility frame, which is a brief moment where you don't take damage due to your attack's animation taking its time to complete. But the reason why these ninjas were so nasty was that these shurikens they would throw would stick into you during these moments of typical invulnerability, and then they would explode later after the invulnerability you were relying on is no longer around. It would create a completely different type of game. How do I time and link together various iframe granting moves to avoid the actual physical attacks around me, the spells, the arrows, the rockets, but then also make sure I'm invulnerable when those incendiary shurikens explode. And how many incendiary shurikens might I have sticking out of my character? Well, it can get kind of crazy. So the combination of nasty mob types, new moves and attacks of mobs, and littering them on top of boss encounters leads to an extremely difficult game. You'd also have checkpoints further out from each other where you might have to fight back to back to back, nearly impossible encounter after nearly impossible encounter, 3, 4, 5 times in a row to get to that next save point or that next heal. The game also featured Trials of Valor, which were these hardcore, intense arenas of near endless enemies pouring in to destroy Ryu with only one way out.
There is one way out. Right now. The building is ours.
To kill your way out. But solving some of those trials wasn't exactly fun or exciting. In some examples, you would just dodge around the arena for upwards of 30 minutes or an hour using a very basic staff combo. Not terribly compelling gameplay, and you can kind of see why they might have been removed later on. But definitely difficult, and fans of the series lament losing that difficult challenge, even if it wasn't always the most exciting challenge to topple. So when we talk about only 1.2% of players clearing the OG's Master Ninja difficulty, it sounds like a big deal, glitch or not. And remember, these metrics don't account for aggregate data. Users who cleared using the glitch, but then later re-cleared without it, or users who only cleared without the glitch, or only cleared with the glitch. It's all one lump sums. So basically, we don't have enough data about this data to know just how many players legitimately cleared Master Ninja. The most that we can infer is that at a maximum, 1.2% of roughly 1 million players would be a ballpark guess on just how many players cleared it both with and without the glitch. This also doesn't count any players who did it completely offline, without ever connecting an account to Xbox servers. Those would probably be few and far between, but maybe in some countries not, honestly. So how many players at maximum have completed Master Ninja? Well, that's at most 12,000 players over the course of nearly 20 years. Data gaps withstanding, you have a higher chance of getting into Harvard than you do beating Ninja Gaiden 2 on the OG version. In fact, it's 3 times harder than getting into Harvard. Think about that for a second. 3.6% Harvard acceptance, 1 in 28 odds, 1.2% Master Ninja, 1 in 87. But hold on, populations matter when dealing with numbers. So exactly how well did Ninja Gaiden sell as a franchise? Was it really better before, if so very few people were able to finish its ultimate challenge? Well, one of its ultimate challenges anyway. Let's take a look back. Ninja Gaiden 2004 sold 1.2 million copies. And then a year later, Ninja Gaiden Black comes out and sells 300,000 copies. Does that sound about right? Then in 2007 or so, we get the PS3 Ninja Gaiden Sigma, and that sells 1.1 million copies. Ninja Gaiden 1 was extremely popular and sold a lot of game. In 2008, I think we got Dragon Sword for the DS that sold 300,000 copies. We got Ninja Gaiden 2 in 2008 for its 1 million, 1.15 million, depending on who you ask, copies sold. Then, a year later, Sigma 2 comes out and sells 480,000 or so copies as a standalone. We get Ninja Gaiden 3 after that, which was like 400, maybe 630,000 copies. And then Razor's Edge comes out. Oh God, what? the same year, maybe later that year, it was like 800,000 copies for Razor's Edge, it looks like. So, and then of course Yaiba, we don't really talk about Yaiba. And then Master Collection as the most recent before Black at 200,000, 240,000 copies or so sold. So we have a kind of sad look here at these metrics to see that the descent of the franchise has been going on over time. It started off at its strongest, the pinnacle of when Team Ninja was at the king of the castle with Dead or Alive and Ninja Gaiden, but then ultimately they had to shift with their markets, and Team Ninja still does really, really well with certain games like Neo, but they don't have their roots at the top of the castle like they used to. But it's only natural given like the lack of new games and ending on such a negative note in gaming media with Ninja Gaiden 3, and Razor's Edge really could not wash itself of the poor reception of Ninja Gaiden 3. Yaiba helped no one after that. With the Master Collection, which is Ninja Gaiden Sigma 1 and 2, and then Razor's Edge of 3, it was really like a stick poke, like, hey, you guys still alive down there? Because we're thinking about coming back. And not many people answered that call comparatively. Ninja Gaiden was much like a YouTuber who stops uploading for years. The algorithm is going to take some convincing to start making the rounds. With these numbers, it's safe to say that not many people played or even finished Master Ninja on the original Xbox version. And because of that, we have to analyze the discussion of should Ninja Gaiden return to original Ninja Gaiden 2 roots, more enemies, more difficulty, more frustration, more old school game development styles, burdensome hurdles, grindy or boring halts in gameplay for the sake of challenge? Well, here's the thing. As much as it would be easy to look at these numbers and say, nah, those old school players don't know what they're talking about, they represent a very small minority in the conversation. The reality is Ninja Gaiden's 2 difficulty didn't just apply to Master Ninja. That might be the hardest challenge it had for a while, but that's not where the challenge started. So these sentiments that we're hearing in the community go back to the way it used to be. It was better, more popular, and it was harder. They dumbed down Ninja Gaiden. But even on those lower difficulties, you can understand the difference. So let's base the conversation around how many players simply finished any difficulty of Ninja Gaiden 2. What is that number for OG? 14%, if you base it on achievements. And if you base it on community sample data from like GameFAQs, which is much older, out-of-date metrics, it's about 21%. So that would be 1.15 million times 0.14. So about 161,000 players is how many people finished Ninja Gaiden 2 on the original OG version on any difficulty, regardless of difficulty that they played on. And those are today's numbers in 2025, never mind how many actually cleared it in its first year. To figure out where popular opinion lies, we'll need to estimate how many copies of Ninja Gaiden 2 Black have been sold and enjoyed. After all, that's the comparison, right? The new, easier way versus the older, harder way. The streamlined, modernized take versus the classic, rigid edges. We have roughly 116,000 copies on Steam sold for Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. Xbox is likely comparable to Steam, especially with Game Pass access. So let's estimate 80,000 to 150,000 across Xbox. In PlayStation 5, Reddit suggests maybe 150 to 300k. It's kind of the best we can do. It is what it is. So we could estimate somewhere around 500,000, maybe 300 to 500,000 copies sold in total. That's pretty damn good, considering it's an old game and it's shadow dropped. We could conservatively say, based on achievements, that it's likely around 18% of players finished at least one difficulty of Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, the latest version. That would put us around 90,000 clears, opposed to the original 161,000 clears. It's notable that we sold half as many copies as the original, so we have half the people playing, but with the decrease in difficulty, it's about a 70,000 drop instead of a raw 80,000 as we'd expect. This means that despite the population being cut entirely in half, and maybe even more than half, clears are slightly above half. This tells a pretty obvious tale. If the game lost half its population and only lost, say, 40% of its clears, this means difficulty isn't the barrier between people beating this game, enjoying this game or not. It has more to do with relevance and the game's reach. The immediate impulse here might be to say that the game's gotten worse, it's bad design because fewer people are playing, and it's easier for noobs, but the change in difficulty didn't actually impact noobs much at all. Based on these numbers, if Ninja Gaiden went back to being brutally hard, we'd have the same amount of people beating it either way. So why can't we go back? Well, Ninja Gaiden 2 was allowed to be brutally difficult because of when it came out, not so much simply because it decided to be difficult. It had a lot to do with the time, the era, the golden age of Xbox, the massive amounts of Halo players left and right. It all impacted Ninja Gaiden profoundly. There was a real drive back then to play hard games and get rare rewards in those days. Rare Halo armor, Ninja Gaiden costumes, so on and so much more. Achievements too. Xbox was the leader in achievements, and that was driving this big push in gaming as well, to earn your rewards. Not so much just show up and get hey, I showed up, give me a cool costume, or hey, I wanted to show up and just buy the best gear. We weren't really in that sort of mentality back in those days, right? But in today's market, things have changed. And unless Ninja Gaiden becomes relevant enough to push against this current, right, where a lot of gamers today, the younger generations, they don't know what it's like to have to earn a lot of your cosmetics. You just buy them. What you typically earn for modern gamers would be like ranked, like a rank in Valorant. You might grind for that, but your cosmetics are all purchasable. They're no longer status symbols like they used to be. So unless Ninja Gaiden really does become relevant to not drive away its until recently dwindling fan base, a Ninja Gaiden 2-esque difficulty OG would just further submit it into obscurity. So how do we get what we want, but still grow this franchise and grow this fan base? Well, if Ninja Gaiden earns back its momentum and its respect, then we will see the challenges increase and increase and increase as we are hoping. So far, Year of the Ninja is promising. But what do you guys think of all this? Does this give hope for a future with Ninja Gaiden 4 and Ninja Gaiden Ragebound? Let me know in the comments below, and please drop a like and subscribe. I worked on this video forever. I'll leave you with this. Some people are worried. The fear really comes at looking at Platinum Games, looking at Team Ninja, and saying maybe you guys just don't have the people at your studio anymore to dare to break the rules, dare to just make something the way that you think it should be. Brutally difficult or unfair sometimes. You're worried maybe about sales numbers or this or that. Well, we're worried that you're not willing to take risks, which is an interesting thing because you could argue that introducing someone like Yakumo is a risk, but inherently we want to see those badass difficulties come back, and you can still have things like hero mode. No one's asking you to get rid of hero mode or acolyte or warrior. Like, there should be a breath. But anyways, that's all for me. I'll see you next time, ninjas.